Agriculture Committee held in the Council Chamber, Guildhall, Derry, Tuesday the 14th of May at 4 p.m. If I just take the roll call, Alderman Chelsea Cook.
Here.
Alderman Guy. Alderman Middleton.
Here.
Councillor Clark.
Sure.
Councillor Cusack.
Here.
Councillor Farrell.
Here.
Councillor Gallagher.
Sure.
Councillor Hart.
Here.
Councillor Hutton.
Sure.
Councillor McDade.
Here.
Councillor McHugh. Councillor Farrell.
Sure.
Thank you, members.
Thanks, everyone, for coming along today. I'm just going to read the broadcasting statement here. I'd like to remind everyone present this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. This broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with the protocol. If you are seated in the lower public seating media areas, it is possible that the recording cameras will capture your image, and this will result in the possibility that your image will become part of the broadcast. By entering the council chamber and using the press or lower public seating area, you're consenting to be filmed and consenting to the use and storage of those images for broadcasting or training purposes and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. If you wish to avoid this, you should move to the upper public gallery. A copy of the council privacy notice may be found on the council website. Thank you. Moving on to item 4, declarations of members' interests. If anybody has any interests, can you let me know, or just let me know through the meeting?
I'm not entirely sure, but I am an employee of Ford Down Syndrome Trust, and I know they're mentioned in item 17 or something. So,
Thank you, Alderman Middleton. Alderman Cook.
Item 20, I'm a board member, Peace Plus.
Okay, anyone else? Councillor Hutton.
Board member, Peace Plus.
And I'm also a member of Peace Plus as well.
Peace Plus as well, Chair. Councillor McKee.
Okay.
Peace Plus as well, Chair. Alderman Guy.
Chair, I'm not a member of the committee, but member of Peace Plus.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 5, which is deputations. We've 2 deputations today. We'll take the first one is to receive Mr. Julian Simpson, Fibrous, and Mr. Andrew Patterson, Telecoms, Department for the Economy, to provide an update in relation to issues in accessing broadband. So if you would like to go ahead there, welcome to the chamber.
Thank you, Chair. I think everyone can hear me. Thank you for the introduction. We'll just repeat the introductions. I'm Nigel Robbins, the Project Director for Broadband Intervention Projects, managed by the Department for the Economy. I'm a non-civil servant assigned by the Strategic Investment Board, and I work with colleagues like Trevor within DFE Telecoms branch, and I'll pass you to Dr. Forsyth, who's the Project Manager for our interventions.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. My name's Trevor Forsyth. I was the project manager for Project Stratum. Now I moved into the project manager for Project Gigabit. I've been involved in telecoms projects with the department for over 10 years. I was involved in a few projects up here about 10 years ago as well. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Julian Simpson. I'm Stakeholder Engagement Manager for Fibrous and the rollout of Project Stratum under the Hyperfast NI brand.
And if you're content, Chair, we'll begin a brief presentation which updates you on Project Stratum, and then Fibrous, the Fibrous viewpoint from Julian, and then we'll finish with where we are on Project Gigabit, which is another important transformational broadband intervention. So I will turn the pages because I have to squint. I haven't been to Specsavers recently, but hopefully you can see the deck. And I won't go through the first slides in too much detail because you may have seen these before, but it's important just to restate the objectives of Project Stratum in this case, which is a project getting near the final deployment phase, which is very encouraging. But it's got one aim, and that is to maximize all available public funding to almost get the job done. And I say almost because some of you may recall when we engaged a few years ago when we were going into this project, we stated that it was a terrific sum of money to have. At the time, it started with 150 million, then 165. It's now at 199 million. So we're just very close to our permissible cap, which is 200 million. And that addresses those homes and businesses that have been underserved through lack of investment. And that's being corrected in some part by Project Stratum, also encouraging commercial investment. There is a little more required, which we'll come to under Project Gigabit, but certainly good progress with Stratum. So to use the funding to maximise coverage, I think we all want the same thing, and that I certainly do. I've lived in Northern Ireland for 12 years, and I'd like it to be ahead of not just the rest of the UK, but other parts of the world, instead of catching up. And we're almost there. In fact, we're already the best connected part of the UK. But there's still work to be done, particularly in rural areas. And Project Stratum's have been focused essentially on rural. 97%, more than 97% of the intervention area is deeply rural. It's a NISRA Band H, sparsely populated countryside and small hamlets and villages of less than 1,000 in population. You would know them well, and we all live and love those sorts of dwellings. So we're drawing on state aid cover, which we still mention post-Brexit because the state aid cover is provided by Building Digital UK, which is an executive agency within the Department for DCIT, the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. It used to be DCMS. But they are the competency centre and provide state aid, which is aligned to state aid assurance, aligned to something called the National Broadband Scheme 2016. So that's been an important governance protocol for the project. And it's also why the benchmark for Project Stratum was set at 30 megabits per second, because back when it started, that was an aspiration and still is for some homes and businesses. And it was aligned to the then draft PFG. It was also aligned to the National Broadband Scheme's aspirations. So homes and businesses that did not have access to 30 megabits per second, or would not for 3 years based on commercial coverage plans, would have been eligible for Project Stratum. And there was a journey up until now to identify all eligible premises and to make sure that the data is interrogated and cleansed and is as accurate as possible. As you can see from the Pac-Man there, we're over 92% of premises now have access to gigabit capable broadband. So although that benchmark is 30 megabits per second, Fibrus are providing a solution, a universal solution that is fiber to the premises, FTTP or full fiber. And any premises that has access to that will have up to 1,000, in some cases more than, but 1,000 megabits per second, which is 1 gig. So those premises are gigabit capable. So when we say gigabits, that's what that means, even though Project Stratum is a project set at a 30 megabits per second benchmark, sort of entry level. The next slide, which you may see there, importantly for Derry City and Strabane, good progress made in that just below 4,000 premises in the area that are eligible for intervention under Stratum have access now to gigabit capable broadband. There's 152 to go, and Julian will take us through when they will be served. But good progress across all councils. Mid-Ulster and Fermanagh, for example, Fermanagh and Omagh, have benefited the most because there was more need in those councils, but there was, proportionately, I would say, there was an equal amount of need in every local council area. And moving on to the things we've done through Project Stratum in the next slide, maximising broadband coverage, gets back to accessing as much public funding as possible. So we wanted to build on the original 150 million, which goes back to the confidence supply agreement that was in place when the project was born. Then we drew on additional funding from DERA, that was 15 million, then another 25 million from DCMS, then additional money from DFE. So a lot of funding sources brought their complexities, but great to see that those resources were pooled to get us to this point now where we're at 199 plus million. And that was necessary for exercises that identified additional premises. So there have been 2 significant ones that have brought in and are bringing in 10,000 additional homes and businesses that are eligible. Some of those were hard to reach, and so the supplier needed more funding to get to them, and some were a result of interrogating data to make sure that premises that were built and approved and legitimately eligible were and are recognised. And so those exercises have allowed us to get to where we are with 199 million of funding and more than 92% of the intervention area served. So I'll pause now before we go into the project gigabit plans and ask Julian to update you on the deployment. So Julian is, of course, known to many of you. One of the great strengths of Fibrus is stakeholder engagement. So Julian would be a face familiar. His feet are on the ground whenever he can get out. And that's so important, I think, so that people can see and hear and challenge and hopefully seek clarification on deployment and connectivity. Julian.
Thank you, Nigel. Okay, I just want to give you an update on the current rollout of Project Stratum and the Hyperfast NI full fibre gigabit capable broadband, specifically within your council area here, and how we're working to maximise the reach of Project Stratum and maximise the connectivity of premises to the Hyperfast NI full fibre network. Next slide, please. Okay, so the rollout of Project Stratum is complete across Derry City Strabane Council there. We're currently serving, as part of the contract, 3,545 premises. That involves almost 1,000 kilometres of fibre being rolled out there. Predominantly, as I'm sure you're aware, we're using about 80% existing infrastructure as part of that build, and then the other 20% is Fibrus own poles, own infrastructure, etc. there. And really, at any point, I always like to stress here that we have a dedicated website to Project Stratum and the Hyperfast NI network if any of your constituents are looking to see how they can connect, if they're included, etc. there. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're looking to leverage Project Stratum and maximise access to full fibre. So recently there's been additional funding from DFE and BD UK, and that has added another nearly 6,000 plus premises to Project Stratum. We have another year to deliver those for this time next year, and that now brings the total reach of contracted premises to 81,000 across the whole of Northern Ireland. Over and above that, as we roll out Project Stratum, there are opportunities to pick up additional premises where perhaps we have spare capacity free that enables us to connect other premises that aren't actually part of the contract. So that's maximising the reach further for Project Stratum. And then there's the Fibre Self-Fund Build product. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that too, whereby a contribution from Fibrus and a contribution from the household or business can be made to allow them to connect to the Hyperfast NI network as it's rolled out. Could you go back there just one, please? Yeah, thank you. So in maximising take-up, we have a stakeholder and marketing team dedicated to Project Stratum and the Hyperfast NI network. So we have a team of fibre ambassadors who are out in amongst the local communities there, raising the profile of Hyperfast NI, Project Stratum, answering any queries, working with the local communities to see if they're part of Project Stratum, how we might be able to connect them, the options that are open to them there. We then have myself as stakeholder manager, predominantly working alongside DFE on queries and so on they would have about the build, but also how people might be able to connect there as well, and very much engaged with the political reps there as well. We also have our inquiries team, so we have a dedicated inquiries team there. And that should really be the first point of contact for to triage any inquiry that comes in. And again, that can be to do with complaints about the build, etc. there, and also about connecting. And they will then triage the inquiry as it comes in and engage the parts of the business that we need to investigate any complaints and how opportunities to connect there as well. We've a dedicated website, sort of mentioned that earlier, and the social media channels. We've done a lot of different marketing activities over the last couple of years, and really social media is the strongest one for us there. We've had a lot of out of home advertising with boards on the back of lorries, etc., in the various areas, but the social media is the big bit, and I would very much encourage representatives and members here today if they could follow us online, because particularly in one instance, the Auchnacloy build there, a political representative followed us there, retweeted, re-engaged their followers, and we reached 30% take up within a couple of months there, which is normally takes a long time, maybe a year or so to do, and in some cases areas wouldn't have reached that just yet. Over and above that, obviously Fibrous is one of the retail service providers. We now have another 2 service providers on there as well, who are out actively selling connectivity to the network. Our team also is working very closely with the various councils. We've done some activities with Derry City Strabane here in the Enterprise Week, as well as Armagh in previous years. We're also partnering with the Ulster Farmers Union and the young farmers there as well. We recently sponsored, for instance, a bowling competition for young farmers and their AGM. Obviously, they're the up-and-coming new generations of farmers there, and are probably very interested, a target audience for Project Stratum and Hyperfast NI. We're also out and about around the various agri-marts and so on, and running digital inclusion events. We've run digital inclusion events for all 52 of the regional builds, and we're working with voluntary organisations and so on to pass on skills to them as well. Also working with the political representatives and the various parties as well, whereby we would attend their business breakfasts and so on there in order to promote the brand and connectivity to the network. Okay, if we go on to the next, please. So self-fund, self-build, yes, I mentioned that previously. This is just a bit more detail, but early on we found that premises that hadn't been included, people were coming to us and going, actually, I would actually pay to get the fibre to the end of my laneway to be able to connect to the network. So we pulled together a product around that, whereby a contribution from Fibrous up to a maximum of £300 can be made, and a contribution from the household or the business to be able to connect those premises. It's proving very successful for us there. So if you've exhausted all opportunities, or your constituents have, I would encourage them to register their interest with the self-fund, self-build team there at the address on the slide. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, these are just an example of some of the testimonials and case studies that are out there. The Guildhall estate represents a good one around self-fund, self-build. The estate wasn't part of Project Stratum. They were running the international sheepdog trials, and they realised last minute that they required decent connectivity to be able to stream these. And those were pay to view, so that was worth money to the sheepdog trials there as well. So we managed to get that in place, and it proved a great success for them. And then we have an individual, Emma Garrett, there, who outside Carryduff, we were able to connect her premises. She had previous experience of the Fibrous network as she's CEO of Mollusk Enterprise Park, and really realised the importance of connectivity. And those testimonial and case studies are on our website if you would like to look at them anymore. So some of them are on the next slide there. Okay, so yes, you can look through these at your leisure. There's some more there, I think. Okay, and if we move on, conscious of time here on my part, this is just some of the, gives you an idea of the boots on the ground out and about there around the livestock marts. Thank you. And if we move on, and these are the up-and-coming events, starting with Balmoral this week. So we've a full agenda right through to the end of the year there as well. Okay, next slide, please. So these are the wholesale providers who I've just mentioned there, and anyone looking to connect should go to the website and engage with these suppliers to get a product and service that suits their particular needs and budget there as well. Okay. And as I say, we're on all the various social media channels, and if you can follow us, that would be great. It is very effective for us in maximising the take-up. I think that's me, folks, unless there are any questions.
Thank you, Julian. If I can just encourage us to we'll go through the Project Gigabit slides quickly and so leave plenty of time for questions and answers so we don't encroach too much on your time. So that was the snapshot of Project Stratum, and Fibrous are doing a terrific job in that they are under budget and ahead of schedule. So that's all we ever ask of a supplier, and they have overcome some of the challenges very readily, as we all have, like the pandemic. But despite things like that and the cost of living crisis and difficulties with some of the supply chain, like poles, Fibrous have managed to deliver on their bold promises. So we still need more funding, though. We still need to complete the job for Northern Ireland, and so that's why Project Gigabit is there. It's there for the whole of the UK. It's part of a UK government initiative, and 5 billion of funding has been earmarked. I should say Fibrous have invested 50 million of their own funds, so it's about $250 million has been spent on the Project Stratum network to make sure that premises benefit from this important intervention. And so now we're focusing on completing Stratum and delivering Gigabit as quickly as possible. So 5 billion earmarked, we don't need that much, but we do have a guarantee that the entire capital funding will be allocated by Building Digital UK, which is great news because, of course, there are enormous pressures on the public purse in Northern Ireland. DFE is, however, standing over the delivery project resource costs, but BDUK will be allocating uncapped the entire capital funding, which takes away a lot of the challenges that were there for Stratum. There's also a greater degree of flexibility with Gigabit, so that if premises data, for example, is not as accurate as you would hope for various reasons, which we're happy to discuss, or there's a new build that was not on the radar going into the project, there is a mechanism to bring these in quite sensibly where there wasn't with Stratum under the state aid restrictions. At Northern Ireland, if you can see those figures there, the North has the UK's highest gigabit broadband connectivity figures, and this has changed in recent years, where it wasn't the case 5-10 years ago as investment slipped. But we're now at 91% of all premises can access gigabit-capable broadband. That dips to 84% in rural areas, but that's already on par with the UK urban figure, which is terrific. So it's very likely that if we can deliver Project Gigabit as quickly as possible, and in a combination of important commercial investments, so the likes of Openreach, Virgin Media, Fibrous, Netomnia, a lot of suppliers now are very active in Northern Ireland, and that's good news for consumers. And the quest is on, really, to get to a ubiquitous or close to ubiquitous, I'm always encouraged to say, gigabit connectivity end result for fixed line broadband, and that's within sight, which is terrific news. So 84% of rural areas have access, so you would expect Gigabit perhaps to be more focused on rural, as Stratum is, and that is the case. And on the next slide, just a little bit about what's also different. We're working in partnership with BDUK. So DFE is the contracting authority for Stratum, and it will be for Gigabit, but we're working in deeper partnership, if you like, with BDUK, and that's significant in that capital allocation is guaranteed. We will prioritize, if we can, any premises that, for various reasons, have not benefited from Stratum. Gigabit allows that. The reasons they wouldn't have benefited would be data anomalies, but for the majority of them, commercial operators changing their plans. So the open market review for Stratum relied on credible information from commercial suppliers. They are at liberty to change their plans, unfortunately, as much as we encourage them to stand over them. And so premises that were in and then were dropped could not be brought into Stratum, but they can be brought into Gigabit for sure. And the difference between Gigabit and Stratum is that about a third of the premises that will be eligible for Gigabit will be those that I described where they couldn't benefit from Stratum because of suppliers changing plans or a lack of funding or capacity, or for example, a wireless internet service provider may have claimed coverage and they cannot claim gigabit coverage. So there are those premises. That's about a third of the intervention area for gigabit, but 2/3 are those that perhaps already have superfast. That's 30 megabits per second and above, but are reliant on copper line, so antiquated copper line infrastructure or wireless internet service provider infrastructure, which is not capable, certainly copper line is not, of delivering gigabit capable broadband. So that's why the UK, one of the reasons, introduced the gigabit scheme. But for Northern Ireland, for us, it means we can mop up all of the eligible premises for those reasons. And so the intervention area, just to finish, we're currently working on that. And the next slide is probably not that helpful. It's a sort of patchwork quilt, but I can tell you that as it stands at the moment, the intervention area has between 20 and 40,000 eligible, what they call white premises, and between 20 and 40,000 premises that are under review, which are those that we need to test the commercial suppliers' coverage claims, and we do have the opportunity to bring them into scope if they're not delivered. That intervention area is changing because, encouragingly, Openreach just a few weeks ago announced an additional 100 million of commercial investment in Northern Ireland, not subsidised, not a penny of it, which is very encouraging. And it's just, I think, an indication of, if you like, to put it crudely, a land grab. We're in the last few percentage of premises, and so all of the suppliers are very active in trying to sign up homes and businesses and keep them. And so that close to ubiquitous goal is very much within sight. So as a result of Openreach's announcement, Trevor and the team have been working with BDUK to interrogate the data and look at what's left so we don't leave premises behind. So it's likely that will reduce, but it'll still be between 20 and 40,000 or thereabouts premises that are likely to benefit from Project Gigabit. Importantly, for Derry City and Strabane area, at the moment, there's 2,632 premises that we have in our sites for Project Gigabit and 973 under review. So that figure will change once we've finalised the intervention area based on the Openreach announcement, and we'll share with you and all local councils the outcome of that analysis. So we very much want now to go into procurement for Project Gigabit and let a contract and complete the jigsaw puzzle so that we have complete fixed line broadband connectivity and the flexibility to bring in premises that are perhaps not on our radars. A lot of premises are not built yet, but if they're not connected and there's no infrastructure nearby when they are built, there should be the opportunity to address them. I think that's the last slide. Let's just see. There may be the one I've just said. Really, is our quest is to get the job done. So we hope to award a contract in this financial year and go out with the launch of procurement at the end of the summer as we move into the autumn months. So between Stratum and Gigabit and commercial investment, the landscape has drastically improved. We're continuing to focus on those premises that we need to make sure are served by these interventions and are not left behind. And we're happy to address any questions you have on that. So thank you. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for the presentation. Thanks, Julian, Andrew, and Nigel. I'll open it up to the floor now for any questions that members may have. Alderman Middleton.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in. Not so much a question, just some comments. So as a party, we in the DUP would like to thank you, Andrew, Gillian and Trevor, for your time, your updates and the informative presentation. It's much appreciated. Also, as a party, we worked hard to secure funding for the rural broadband rollout, and therefore we recognise how important rural connectivity is for online working, social inclusion and contributing to tackling rural isolation. By being here today to hear from our council, I see this as a really positive step, particularly as a rural councillor. I would like to share that in many of our rural areas, Fibrous in particular is working wonderfully and has connected people and widened opportunities. So we're thankful for that. I know there are a few issues and a few houses to go, but very thankful for your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Alderman Middleton. Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, I'm not a member of the committee, so I welcome the opportunity. Thank you very much for your presentation. Clearly a hell of a lot of work engaged there and has been done. And I suppose one can talk in terms of the black spot on the white page. And the white page is there, but it's the black spot that concerns me, as you will understand. And the pressure that I come under, I'm in the Castleberg area, is premises that are not connected and the difficulties that presents. You hear stories of, you know, the guys have done the work along my road. They've done the house across the road from me, but never come to me. And I did hear the same sort of story from Councillor Leonard, who's in the Spurn area, when I brought it to the attention of council. So I suppose, what's the timescale? You mentioned there the re-engagement. What timescale was that on? And the pickup of those premises that you know, have been bypassed, for want of a better word, and what is the criteria that those households need to be looking at to re-engage? The additional, these are, you know, have they been identified in the additional eligible premises? I'm aware of a case where I was told anecdotally that the householder was asked for £3,000 to connect. Now, you did mention the 50% up to a maximum of 300. Quite insufficient for that particular household. So could you address that particular issue of connectivity? Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Hussey. I'll hand to Trevor in a moment in terms of what we're doing to identify premises that are not overlooked. The reasons why sometimes there's a premises that has a neighbouring property that could be eligible and where they may not be. And Alderman Hussey, I know we had some correspondence, yourself and the team at DFE Telecoms in January and February about one particular premises. And that's an example, really, where that premises wasn't eligible because of a commercial supplier's coverage claims. That premises now can access speeds of 30 to 55, which means under stratum they were not eligible. And it may seem unfair to the householder who has neighbours who can access a gig under the solution that's been provided by Fibrous. But in those situations, and I think the team may have advised that a supplier, it could be Fibrous or anybody who's able to provide a service that's 1 gig, for example, and it's in close proximity to another premises, would not generally charge a connection fee. It's really a commercial decision for the supplier. I'll ask Julian in a moment about that 3,000 because that sounds out of kilter, but you know, we would love to hear about examples like that, because this is not why these interventions are here. But if a premises is not eligible and we're unable to do anything about it due to state aid restrictions, then there's always choice, and that's why Fibrous have offered the self-build, self-fund choice. But Project Gigabit will deliver to those that are not. And I'll ask Trevor to take you through some of the things we've been doing to interrogate the data, because data is everything, and that's been for every intervention. It's so crucial that the information is accurate. But Trevor.
Thank you. Yes, we recognise that the data sets we were looking at, there were some anomalies in that data. We were reliant on a data set called Pointer, and we assumed that the Pointer was an accurate reflection of the building environment in Northern Ireland. It relies on data feeds from a number of sources, including council building control, planning officers, rating information as well, as part of gathering that intelligence. To try and improve that situation, we are now looking at a wider set of data. So we're now looking, as well as using the Pointer data set for premises information, we're also interrogating rating information as well to find out premises that have been, where rates have been levied or they're rateable, as a way of trying to identify that there's likely to be someone in those premises at this stage. One of the other idiosyncrasies we also found was that when building stratum, some of the property records we had when Fibrous went to look at them, it turned out the property was vacant or derelict. And, you know, we're just trying to use available government information sources to try and find what is happening in the space locally. We would have, we're trying now to improve how we interrogate that data. We think we've got a better handle on the information there, but it does rely on it being kept up to date and kept current. And we, you know, if we do identify that at this stage, now is the time that we can be told about it so that premises can be included in the next intervention we might take. But it's a very challenging landscape, and I'm sure as councillors, you know the whole issue about planning and building and all of those issues. And, you know, we're trying to make use of that information. And certainly when you're talking to your people about, you know, building controls, also just to remind them, have you thought about, you know, your broadband provision as well? We're getting stories of builders coming and sort of saying, oh, I'm looking for a broadband connection. And it's something that happens just right at the end of a build process. And we're sort of saying, well, you know, we would encourage you to start talking about that and thinking about your communications in the same way that you think about your electricity and your sewage and your water services as well as part of that package.
Thanks, Trevor. And you, David? Thank you. With regard to self-fund, self-build, costs can vary significantly. There's so many factors to being able to connect sort of an off-grid, if you like, premises. All sorts of different infrastructure. There may be some of it in place, there may not, that needs to be costed in. And with regards to that specific one you mentioned at £3,000, I'm very happy to look into that and provide a breakdown for you. And with regard to that, if you can send the details through. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Chair. Thank you very much for the response.
Thanks, Alderman Hussey, and thanks for answering those questions. I don't see Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not a member of committee, so appreciate you letting me come in. It's really in a similar vein to Alderman Hussey. I'm from the rural area outside Castlederg as well, and I know, Julian, I've been in touch with you about premises. You'd mentioned there spare capacity to deliver additional premises. So I suppose my question is, if premises are being identified now, does that mean they can be added? Because I know there's a particular road that I have been asking about. There's a number of houses, the roads leading up to that have access to fibres, but that particular road doesn't have, because I think another provider was meant to do it and didn't do it. And you'd mentioned there grey pickups, and I've seen that in the postcode listings for gigabit. I'm just wondering what that is, if you could explain that. I suppose I had similar questions around the self-build. What are the wait times around that for premises that would like to avail of that? And, you know, can you give an idea in terms of average cost of what that might cost residents? And I suppose for me, it would be frustrating that neighbours are able to get access to that free, and yet other premises then would have to pay for that if it's a self-build. Again, just looking at in terms of procurement and starting to deliver with gigabit and starting that rollout, you know, what are the time frames around that? And I suppose, again, just a comment to welcome that. I think what you said was that you didn't want to leave premises behind. So I welcome that. And I suppose it's just about how we might be able to work on that. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Will all three take their questions, if we may. I would just start by saying that I would never discourage anybody from considering a self-fund, self-build solution, but I would certainly encourage them to take stock if it was priced at something at the levels we've discussed earlier. Speaking personally, as a non-civil servant, I can say this. I was faced with a similar situation, and I got a Starlink satellite connection for a couple of hundred to tide me over until the gigabit bus comes, and it's a slightly higher monthly fee, but you can switch off at any time. There are other choices. Project Gigabit will come to premises that are eligible for intervention, but unfortunately the wait is the most frustrating part, and that's why I think people understandably consider other solutions. or a supplier, not just Fibrous, but others, if they have infrastructure in the area, where that crude land grab I mentioned means that there are more opportunities for homes, consumers to avail of enticing offers. Most likely it would be Fibrous in the Stratum open access network. But that's one question. Capacity, I'll ask Julian to take that one because the network was built to serve 100% of eligible premises, but then Trevor will give some hope in terms of the gigabit timeline, I hope. But Julian.
Okay, yeah. Grey premises are effectively premises as part of the rollout of Project Stratum to the contracted premises that we have to deliver. On occasions, if you're going up a road, for instance, there may be, say, 6 houses that you need to connect, and you could have 6 ports for that, and that's fine. You'll maximise that out. So there probably are no greys if there's a 7th there. On occasions, there might be, we might be using a 12-port one, and there's only 11 premises that were contracted to connect. At that point, our planners would look and go, well, there's a premises there not included. Hold on a minute, we may as well pick that up going past there at the time. So it's only if there's extra infrastructure as a result of meeting the contractual premises that if there's extra capacity there and it's feasible for us to pick them up, we would, and that's what we would call grey premises there. So they're over and above the contracted white premises. Regarding the average cost, I would need to get back to you that. I'd need to speak to the self-fund, self-build team there. And with regards to the timescales for self-fund, self-build, it's that there's a significant backlog there. It is a very, very popular product, and it could be 6 months before they'd be able to even get back with the desktop quote at this point.
Thank you, Julian. And I'll just ask Trevor to expand on this one, but I wanted to say a few words on WISPs, wireless internet service providers. So particularly for the Dairy and Strabane area, there are a lot of important active WISPs. Beacon Broadband, for example, is a good one. And we've engaged through Stratum with WISPs because they have and continue to provide an important service, because long before these interventions came, WISPs were the only way of getting something faster than dial-up. So we certainly didn't want to overlook the work they had done, so engaged with them as transparently as possible, knowing that they wouldn't ultimately be happy with the prospect of broadband intervention sort of trampling over their customer base. That's a reality of innovation and new technology. So the reason I say that is because a lot of premises under Stratum were not eligible because WISPs quite rightly claimed that they could provide a coverage of more than 30 megabits per second. It's slightly different for gigabit because gigabit requires a gig, 1,000 megabits per second. And although technology is improving, it's not possible at the moment for WISPs, as far as we can say today, based on information provided, to provide a gigabit capable service. So there are some of those premises that are neighbours of those that are eligible that have been served by WISPs. And Trevor perhaps can expand a little bit on what gigabit will do to assess the eligibility and the timeline for delivery.
Yes, gigabit, regarding those properties who aren't able to access, so long as we know about them sooner, we can add them to the lists to ensure that their services can be designed for them and see what the outcome of the procurement is. You were talking there about the timeframes for gigabit. At this stage, Nigel, we've mentioned that we expect to be able to award a contract towards the end of the financial year. We expect the build time to be anything from 3 to 4 years. So it's quite a long time. If you're in year 4 of that, that could be quite frustrating, and we understand that. It shouldn't be the case, though, that if you're in that list, that you will have to pay for a connection. But I suppose the question is, if you were in that position, you're in a dilemma. Do I wait? Do I look at something alternative, like a self-fund, self-build, if it's in my area? Do I think of alternative technologies as well? These are all parts of the balancing act I would imagine you would have to make as a consumer. We can understand the frustration, and we're trying to capture with the best information that we have. And certainly if there are particular areas that you think need a little more attention, we'd be more than happy to take those inquiries and have a look at them. And then we can provide an update as to what we think is likely to happen in those areas over the next 3 years as well.
Thanks for those answers, Councillor Devine. Councillor Farrell.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to Nigel, Julian and Trevor for coming today. I'm more of an urban councillor. I wouldn't get many queries regarding rural broadband, but obviously the number of households and premises that have benefited from this scheme is going to make a massive difference to their lives. One of our councillors who's based in Eglinton is not in this committee, and he couldn't make it here today. Has a number of queries, individual queries about individual properties in that area. Who is the best person to speak to? Is it Julian or yes? Would it be possible to get all contact details sent out at the end of the meeting?
Absolutely, yes. I can give you my personal details there, or in any case, if anyone wants to go through inquiries at hyperfastni.com, they'd probably be directed to me anyway.
Cheers, Julian. Thank you.
And to keep it neutral, if it's a question about a general broadband question where other suppliers may have skin in the game, please do contact Trevor or myself through the DFE Telecoms website. So individual properties we're always very happy to look at, because that's the only way, isn't it, of filtering on the ground the real anomalies and challenges. But if it's a fibrous connectivity issue, that's Julian. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's everybody. I'd just like to thank you for coming on again, Julian and Nigel, and apologise, Trevor, for calling you Andrew earlier. That was what I was reading off the sheet. So thanks again. I'll just give you a minute to finish up.
Thank you, Teresa, for keeping us right.
Okay, moving on to our next deputation. We're going to receive Mr. Ian Greenway, Department for Communities, Ms. Roisin McDonough, Chief Executive, and Mr. Liam Hannaway, Chair, Arts Council ANI, regarding how underinvestment in the Northwest is to be addressed within the respective strategy documents. So if, again, I'll let you speak, and then we'll open up to the floor for questions and answers. So go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, committee, for the chance to address you. As you said, I'm Ian Greenway, Director of Culture in Department for Communities, a role that includes arts, creativity, museums, libraries, observatories, Indigenous languages and sign language. In this case, we're going to talk more about arts and creativity, and indeed particularly around the dispersal of funding and to this district compared to other districts, which I'm going to defer to Arts Council colleagues on. And then when they finish talking, I will give a sense of the overarching culture, arts, heritage strategy the department is progressing.
Members, thank you very much for the invitation. Delighted to be here back in the Guildhall. In previous life, I spent time here, but that's a different story. I suppose I've been chair of the Arts Council since 2021, and I suppose the relationship between the Arts Council and Derry City Council, in the first instance, Derry Easterbang District Council, goes back many years, including the year of the City of Culture, which was a fantastic year in terms of culture within the city, and very important for the Read Across the North. And that's been particularly important for ourselves in terms of build on that and develop on that. I suppose what I will say also too, that I was also a board member of Unboxed. I had the great pleasure of working with the Nerve Centre here in the city in terms of development of our place in space, which secured roughly £6 million for the Nerve Centre in terms of delivering the projects, which were delivered across several locations across the north, a couple of locations across the England, and indeed has now since gone to Vietnam. So again, it shows that really what the growth of the sector has been. Indeed, the guys in the Nerve Centre said that the City of Culture give them the confidence to be able to bid for major projects, multi-million pound projects, and work in connection with Microsoft and Oliver Jeffers in terms of delivering that. So it's been a terrific project for ourselves in terms of promoting the arts. I suppose maybe if I can set the scene from our perspective in terms of investment in the city and district, the issue is it's very hard to invest into it when you don't have the money to invest. I suppose we have seen the budget for the Arts Council decline from 2013-2014 of roughly of a budget of about £14 million, dropped to £10 million the following year, and last year our budget allocation was £9.5 million. Albeit the additional money we got in year brought it up to over 11 million, but it still leaves us in a position whereby if we were to get pro rata the same level of monies we got 2013, 2014, we'd be talking about double our budget. And that has been extremely of concern to us, because it means that really it's basically very, very hard for us to keep all organisations going with just purely standstill money. We have no further money to invest. And indeed, in terms of, we only brought one new project onto our annual funding programme last year, and indeed had to drop 2 or 3 projects off, which we were able to fund over lottery. As you will appreciate too, we also get roughly about £10 million in terms of lottery, but lottery is based on tickets bought, and in recent years there has been a steady, probably stabilisation, if not decline, slight decline in the level of lottery funding. So we've seen a lot of our lottery funding gone into fund what actually we should be funding through exchequer monies come to ourselves. So it leaves us in a very, very difficult situation, and that's why we need to work with the councils across the north to actually make an argument how important the arts and the arts sector is, not only for art's sake, but also particularly for the economy. As I said, the work that the Nerve Centre has done is particularly importance for the arts in terms of the economy, but also in terms of health and well-being. Sure, some of you will be aware of the script for mental health, which they argue that if the arts were better funded in terms of opportunities for people, in terms of well-being, they could actually reduce the amount of money we're spending on drugs for people who are suffering from mental health issues. And also then you will be only too aware of the importance of education, the importance of arts for education, not only in terms of building the capacity for young people, but giving young people an opportunity outside their normal careers to develop artistic careers. So I'm going to pass to Roisin there. I'll pick up on the detail.
Thank you, Chair and councillors and committee, for allowing us to make a presentation here today. The first thing I wanted to say is that obviously the Arts Council is a regional development agency and funder of the arts right across the whole of Northern Ireland and indeed and the north. Just to be clear that we don't use place-based criteria when we are deciding, when our board decides the funding allocations that it wishes to make with the applications presented in front of it. We respect and we believe that we are complementary to the work of local government in terms of community-based planning. However, we do see ourselves as not allocating on a per capita basis for each district council area. I think that's important to note. But we do recognise that our colleagues, our partners in local government are absolutely vital as part of the infrastructure of funding for arts organisations. And, without the local authorities and indeed other forms of support, be it from the department or other departments that Liam has already referenced, health and so on, the arts would be in a much more difficult place than they are currently. However, as our chairman has said, we find ourselves really in a very difficult situation with year-on-year decline in our capacity to be able to deal with the level of demand that we face. Inevitably, we get more applications from both individuals and arts organisations who have gravitated to and live in urban areas, and I would include the city of Derry in that, as well as obviously Belfast. We've endeavoured to give you the figures. We are the keeper of official statistics, recognised as such on the arts, and we've shared with you the arts data across the whole of Northern Ireland, so you can see the broader picture and the challenges that we face. So, for example, we've given you comparative figures with what we think are our nearest and most straightforward comparable places which award funding for the arts, including Wales, and you'll see they're almost double the figure that we get, roughly. And indeed, with our colleagues in Ancola Island, the Arts Council of Ireland in the south, they get more than 4 times the amount allocated for the arts through their government than we currently have at our disposal. And our chair has already explained the decline, the relative decline in our lottery income, which again, we have used in order to try and shore up the core arts infrastructure that makes applications to us under our annual funding programme. What I would say is that over the last 10 years, we've done the figure, £28.6 million worth of funding for arts organisations in Derry and Strabane District Council area, and we're very proud of that. And we're very proud to be the principal funder of the cohort of arts organisations that you have within your area. And I know there have been figures presented in the past comparing unfavourably the per capita allocation for funding of the arts in your district council area. But our figures are actually showing that per capita, in terms of the Northern Ireland population, you get over 3 times the value of that. Now, we do recognise that because our levels of funding have decreased both in cash and in real terms over the years, that will have affected you as well in terms of our ability to continue to provide funding for your arts organisations in this area to the level that they actually need, and we would recognise that. What we do know is that there is a disparity between urban and rural communities. And we also appreciate that within Derry and Strabane District Council area, there are some rural communities. You referred to them earlier on when we were talking about the broadband issue. And so one of the programmes that we have tried in order to correct that regional imbalance, to develop, albeit with a very limited resource, as our chair has said, has been the Rural Engagement Arts Programme. And I hope that some of your rural-based organisations within your district council area have managed to benefit from that. I just wanted to say a couple of words about funding, because I know comparison has been made with Belfast. And yes, Belfast does receive more funding, and that's a function, well, there's two related aspects to that. The first of which is that urban areas tend to attract artists who want to kind of network, who want to have access to resources and organisations and forms of support, as do arts organisations with larger audiences. It is a trend that we have observed, and we're not unique in that in this part of the world. It's a trend that is elsewhere in these islands. But the second thing I want to say, that the fact that an organisation is headquartered in Belfast, because we capture the data based on where their postal code is. The fact that their headquarters in Belfast does not mean to say that as regional organisations they are delivering beyond the city. And in fact, we have done an analysis for your information to say that of the 43% of the activity delivered by Belfast headquarters organisations goes beyond Belfast. And I think that's really important to note. And we're aware that, you know, it's beyond Derry and Strabane District Council area. There are good examples, I think, of delivery of Belfast headquartered organisations into York District Council area as well as elsewhere. The other thing to say is that we're very pleased to have been able to partner with you on the resilience programme. We provided a pot of money that you have matched to support the development and resilience and growth of arts organisations so that they can be really strong and fit for business and look forward to the future with some kind of hope in relation to what are the key things that they can do in order to strengthen themselves. So we're pleased that we've been able to partner with you on that. We look forward to continuing dialogue in terms of the actions that will flow from that and the considerations that there need to be therein. And I suppose I'll leave you perhaps with the final point, I think, which was underlined by our chair. The one thing that we want to do is to work constructively with everybody in all local authorities to raise the visibility in terms of the impact and the value of the arts in order to grow the overall pot for the arts in Northern Ireland, which does lag severely and has done for many a year behind other parts of these islands. So, Chair, those are my initial remarks.
Thank you, Arts Council colleagues. I want to say just some words on the Culture Arts Heritage Strategy that the department is developing, and we're asked to speak to this in the request to attend as well. And the work underway at present in the department is to develop a 10-year Culture Arts Heritage Strategy for Northern Ireland, which will be designed to address the needs, ambitions and aspirations of people across those sectors and across our society, which includes, as Liam and Roisin have mentioned, the contributions of the sectors to economy, to health, to well-being, to education, to places, to communities, to the quality of life. And in particular, that arts, culture and heritage can be key enablers of equality, inclusion, innovation and social and economic value. So whilst not wishing to prejudge the outcome of the processes, it's fair to say that among other things, we expect our work to consider in particular the role that culture, creativity and heritage can play in tackling disadvantage and supporting equality of access and opportunity, supporting communities and individuals right across Northern Ireland. It will aim to be visionary, but it will have to work within what is, and councillors will know, an extremely challenging and profoundly challenging public expenditure environment that is likely to persist for a number of years. Just to give a sense of where we've come from on that and to put this into context, in May 2021, the Culture Arts Heritage Task Force was convened by our then Minister, and the focus very much was on the response to the coronavirus pandemic and the public health restrictions that were required, and therefore was around funding to keep organisations going across a wide range of sectors. But the task force that was assembled and chaired by Arthur Johnston produced a report called The Art of Recovery, which did include a number of things that were looking to the medium and longer term alongside the short-term interventions. And that led to the department publishing a way forward document in October 2022, which detailed the intention of a co-design process to work towards a strategy. The task force undertook an immense amount of work on that and had more than 40 groups of stakeholders and focus groups with over 200 people right across the sectors, and they submitted a report called Investing in Creative Delivery to the department in July 2023. What the department is now doing is picking up that engagement, that report, to produce a strategy, recognising the immense amount of consultation within the sectors, but the need in particular, therefore, to ensure engagement across executive departments and district councils to ensure that all of the inputs are taken before we bring forward a draft strategy to the Minister and then for public consultation, which we anticipate being able to open in the late summer of this year. So that's where we've come from and where we are going to on the strategy, not overly curtailing our ambition and our vision for all that Culture Arts Heritage can do, but recognising it needs to respect the profoundly challenging public expenditure climate. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian, Rasheen and Liam. I'll open it up now to the floor for questions. Councillor Farrell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks to Ian, Rasheen, and Liam for coming here today to discuss the burning issue of regional balance and to discuss your respective strategies. I think it's no secret that this council and our partners across the arts and culture sector, across this council area, have serious concerns about how funding is allocated by the Arts Council. And we've read your presentation, we've read it in detail, and the key takeaway for us is that 72% of Arts Council funding for organisations across the north goes to organisations in Belfast, even though Belfast only has 18% of the population. When we look at spend per capita, which the Arts Council are saying shouldn't be measured, it's £17 per head across this council area, and it's £44 per head in Belfast. And when we look at the funding in totality, this council area last year got £2.5 million, whilst Belfast got over 15. So our view is that the distribution of this funding is not fair, it's not balanced, and the Belfast organisations benefit massively from the current funding arrangement. The Arts Council obviously has a contrasting view, but our opinion is that this cannot be allowed to continue. In the Arts Council's 10-year strategy, it does not mention regional balance. It does not mention tackling regional inequalities, and it has certainly no targets for addressing funding disparities across this region. And the Arts Council has data that says that Belfast organisations, despite having 18% of the population, got 72% of the funding. And in your strategy document, in fact, in the equality impact assessment, along with that document, you chose to use different figures. You showed figures that said that 45% of the organisations who benefit from funding were based in Belfast, instead of saying that 45 or 72% of the actual funding went to organisations based in Belfast. And I, for one, would want to know why, in an equality impact assessment, you had two data sets, one saying 45%, one saying 72%, and you ignored the 72% completely. I have a theory on this, I've got a view on this. It was that the 45% looked better. 45% was palatable, 72% looked awful. And we believe this is a deliberate and calculated attempt to present some semblance of balance, some semblance of fairness, some semblance of equality, and to distract completely from the fact that Belfast benefits massively from the current funding arrangement. So that's our view on this presentation. I've got a question specifically about the strategy. There is no mention in the Arts Council strategy about addressing regional balance. Have you any intention of amending that strategy to focus on regional balance? Because we've got the Department for Communities here. As a key funder, Ian, can you stand over how this public money is currently being allocated? And we are aware that you have a strategy, but it has a key commitment about regional balance. And regional balance is not included in the corresponding document from the Arts Council. So one would have thought government department funds the Arts Council. The government department says they're going to tackle regional balance, but the Arts Council doesn't. So I don't know how that aligns. You know, when you've got the key funder set as one particular priority and the beneficiary of the funder doesn't have the same list of priorities. So if DFC is serious about tackling regional balance across the North when it comes to the delivery of arts and culture, how can it do it when its key delivery partner doesn't share the same goals and objectives? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Farrell. Maybe I can start at towards the end of your questions and then ask our council colleagues to comment on the earlier parts. I think we need to be clear that Department for Communities does not have a culture, arts, heritage strategy. The report I think you're referring to, Investing in Creative Delivery, is a report from the task force to the department. The department has not yet issued any strategy in draft or in final form, and we do recognise that Arts Council needed to proceed with having a strategy for their own activity for the next 10 years because of the void that was left above for reasons of institutional stasis and so on that we perhaps don't need to go into in great detail, but we are now actively working on that strategy. It will address very clearly and be focused around need as well as benefits that can be delivered, and will be focused around levelling up through culture, arts and heritage. That's a phrase that you will hear more and more of, I think. What I would also say though, and it would perhaps to echo some of Roisin's points, that the Arts Council takes applications from where they come, that applicants in this district are actually statistically more successful, more likely to be successful than in, I think, any other district, certainly than the majority of districts. And it is, in its main funding programme, is neutral, is ambivalent on geography, and then uses other funding programmes around those where funding is available, referring back to Liam's comment, to pick up some of the areas that might be left exposed through that. But so the main point I wanted to make is, yes, the department is progressing a strategy. We don't have one yet. So the statements around regional inequality and investing creative delivery are in a report to the department, not from the department. But Roisin may want to comment on, or Liam, on the more specifics.
Probably for one of the issues was raised when I joined the Arts Council was again in terms of disparity of funding across the North. So you take it from my accent, I don't come from Belfast, I'm from South Armagh. I'm involved in a couple of arts organisations in South Armagh and the Newry area. And in terms of the level of funding there, I could make similar arguments, but I accept the argument is you fund where the applications should come from. Second point I want to make is that you do, there's a number of the regional organisations which are headquartered in Belfast. So, for example, arts and business. I attended an event here about 2 or 3 months ago down in the Millennium Forum with arts and business. Again, a Belfast-based organisation, but working with the Derry Chamber of Commerce and the arts organisations here to achieve funding in to help support the arts. Theatre and Dance, which represents people in the Theatre and Dance organisation, headquartered in Belfast, based down in here. Board Youth Action, which again works on young people's arts projects on several locations across the North, but headquartered in Belfast, but work out of Enniskillen, Armagh, Derry and Newry. And again, so what we have is a number of organisations right across the board which actually are headquartered in Belfast, but actually have a much more regional spread. So maybe pass to Roisin in case you want to pick someone.
No, Chair, that formed part of the presentation and part of the information contained in the paper. I mean, if we were to fund on a per capita basis, it would actually be to the detriment of this Derry and Strabane District Council area. We can only fund those applications that come to us and we assess. That's all that we can do now. We have in the past, and we will continue, which is why I think it's really important that we work with you and with other local authorities. We'll do targeted roadshows where we find there are people who are not, it's not that they're not getting any money from us, it's because they haven't applied. So we as a distributor of public funds cannot give out money unless there has been an open and fair application process available to everybody. And what we have tried to do and what we will continue to try to do is to encourage applications from underrepresented areas. And there is definitely an urban and rural differential. Of that, there is no doubt. So I think that is the approach that we would adopt. We did discuss this issue at our recent board meeting, which signed off on the strategy, Chair, as you will recollect. And the board were resolved that the issue is, as the figures attest, an issue between urban and rural disparities, not necessarily a regional northwest, northeast, wherever. In fact, if you look at the figures, some of the lowest per capita the lowest per capita district councils are, Derry is and Strabane is way ahead of everybody else, and they could be making exactly the same argument. We rely on good applications coming into our funding programmes, and the ones that come from this part of the world are invariably good and strong, and we fund them. And indeed, when we get extra in-year allocations, we continue to make sure that though the extra resources provided by the department, known as end-of-year slippage as it used to be, no longer call that, but that there is an allocation distributed across the annual funding programme, which includes organisations that have applied from this particular part of the world.
Just briefly, Chair, and thanks for letting me come on again. Roisin, Ian and Liam, thanks for your answers. Thanks for honest answers. So I'd ask the question about the figures that you decided to include in your quality impact assessment. So why did you choose the 45% that indicated that 45% of the organisations that you fund are based in Belfast, and ignored the fact that Belfast gets 72% of the allocation? It was an equality impact assessment. You had two data sets. You chose the one, in my view, that looked better. So would you agree with that? And have you any intention of amending your 10-year strategy, because 10 years is a long time, to include some focus on investing in the West? Thank you.
Chair, we're obviously very happy to come back in a bit more detail on that. I'm not sure there's an inherent contradiction between saying that 45% of the organisations that were funded got 72% of the funding. We have been, I think, open and transparent with our information here. We provided you with very detailed figures. I'm happy to come back on that. There's nothing more than that's just what was in the equality impact assessment, but I'm certainly happy to check that if you feel that there's something untoward there. But there isn't necessarily a logical contradiction between saying that 45% of the organisations that we funded were in Belfast and they got 72% of the funding for reasons of scale. Some of them are very large organisations, and as our chair has said already, for example, the Ulster Orchestra would get £2.4 million, but has been here in the Guildhall, has benefited. So, the citizens of Derry, but it is headquartered in Belfast. That is true. And we'll come back if you feel there's something untoward in those figures. I don't think there is.
Thanks, Councillor Farrell. Are you content enough? I don't know if I'm not sure if you're content, but
I've asked the questions, and the one about, have you any intention of having any targets regarding regional balance in your 10-year strategy? That's been dodged completely.
No, I can be quite clear. The strategy isn't based on a regional perspective. It's based on art forms and actually accessibility to the arts right across the north. That's what our attention is. And also, to get back to the first point is, percentage of a lower percentage is going to be less money for everybody. So I think the big thrust is how we can build an arts sector for the last 10 years, which has been decimated, which is way out of kilter with any other nation across these islands, which is actually seeing many of our young people travelling south and across England to get work in the arts sector, seeing a reduction in the number of people going to train in both music and drama and arts, seeing actors in equity crying that they can't get the proper wages, that they finish shows like Blue Lights, which have got high profile, and end up working in bars and doing runs for Tesco. That's the big issue here. We need to get more money for the arts. Until we get more money for the arts, it's going to decline and decline, no matter whether it's in Belfast or Derry. So our strategy is worked on that premise about how we can build in the next 10 years. And the reason why we've gone from 5 years to 10 years, because we've slipped so far back, it's going to take us 10 years to try and get to a position where the arts is back to the place it was 10 plus years ago. So to answer the question, no, we're not on the mission of actually delivering regionally. It's about how we collectively support all the art forms.
Thanks, Liam. I'll go to, I have quite a number of speakers looking to come in here, so I'll go to Councillor Hutton.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for coming in today, and thank you for the presentation. And just what has been said there, I think now at this stage, it's about us working with yourselves and trying to lobby the government for that money that you're speaking about. That is so much needed in the arts and cultural sector. It's about us lobbying together for the additional funding. You have the 10-year strategy. You've launched the 10-year strategy. So with that plan ahead, it's how this council and the Arts Council for Northern Ireland can lobby together for the greater Northwest, not just for this council area in particular, it's for the Northwest as a whole. So it's for the betterment of that, and we need to figure out how we're going to do that together. And I think by doing that, there would be more of a presence here in this district, this council area by the Arts Council to see the talent that we've got here, to see the organisations that are providing those much needed services, both in the entertainment world and, as you rightly said, the health and wellbeing world. We're seeing it tenfold how much arts and culture is having a massive positive impact in health and wellbeing across the lifespan. We have arts and arts for mental health. We have art for tourism, art for business, art for culture, art for young minds. So it is important how we take this forward and how we're going to work together to lobby for that extra money. But what I also wanted to ask as well was in relation to capital funding. So how projects here can apply for those capital, that capital funding for the likes of new build or even refurbishments. So I think the substantial investment in the arts is needed, and it's how we can work together in order to lobby government for that money. But thank you for coming along today and giving us that presentation. And it's about how we're going to go forward with this and work together to get the much needed funding that's needed. Thank you.
Chair, just thank you for your comments, and again, I welcome the comments about working together to get money for the arts, because it's critical at this point in time. To say that I know how good the talent is. I've been to about 4 or 5 shows in the Playhouse. I've been at the Millennium Forum. As I said to you, I work very, very closely with the Nerve Centre in terms of delivery of our place in space. Was up here for the weekend when it was launched here as part of the Jazz Festival. I've been, in your space. I've been within your space here onto it, and I've been working, across a number of other writers' organisations in other parts of the district. So listen, I'm passionate about the arts. It's what as I left local government, I said I wasn't doing any other job other than working for the arts, because I just feel so strongly that we are going to become a cultural wilderness unless we can get some more money. And like, you take actors, I know the number of young people from the sector who are all working in the south. To give you an example, Irish National Opera, which I know particularly, gets £6 million. We give Irish Northern Ireland Opera £500,000. The Abbey Theatre gets £8 million. We give the Lyric just over £1 million. That's only one producing house we've got here. And it's craziness. And to give you an example, they did Snow Queen. They couldn't afford to have two extras or two understudies. They had to close for 2 weeks because 2 of the actors got sick. They lost £60,000 in them 2 weeks. And that absolutely emptied their reserves. They managed to run this year because they were able to keep the thing going. I know that from talking to Kevin at the Playhouse, I know in terms of it's just living from hand to mouth in terms of the money onto it. And so it doesn't matter whether it's in Derry, or it doesn't matter whether it's in Belfast, or it doesn't matter whether it's in Newry. The artists are currently living on a very minimal wage. We've recently done a piece of work in looking at artists in terms of what artists. There's no artist living here that is getting the living wage. There is no artist getting this here, and even the grants that we give them is leaving them roughly about £16,000 on their annual salary, and these are people who have trained, same as doctors, same as engineers, same as other people. And they need to get a proper living in the country where they were brought up and where they were educated and where they want to work. And that's critically important.
You had a question in relation to capital funds. We receive our capital funding from the department, often for musical instruments, small items of equipment, health and safety. And beyond that, we haven't had any capital build monies for quite some time. And in fact, we haven't yet received a capital allocation this year from the department. We're hopeful that we will get one, but we know capital is very constrained. I was very pleased to hear you talk about mental health, because what we're doing at the moment is we'll be opening a programme to try and support the mental health of our artists. So whilst we know that the arts are major contributors to people's sense of health and well-being, including mental health, particularly working with children and young people, fabulous work that is done there to be celebrated. And I think we're often world leaders in that regard. However, it is the mental health of our own artists that is most concerning. And so we're going to be opening a programme which is designed to support artists better look after themselves, and that is essential so that they can look after the rest of us.
Thank you very much. And that is really enlightening to hear that as well, because we did have deputations at one stage through this committee, and it was really saddening to hear how artists feel and how they feel that they're not valued. So by saying that today, it's really enlightening that you are looking after their mental health as well, because it would be challenging times for them. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hutton. Alderman Middleton.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in, and thank you on behalf of the DUP to Ian, Roisin and Liam, both for your time and coming here today, your passion and your detailed presentation and information you've shared with us. Given the concerns that you have shared regarding your funding situation, may I ask firstly how you foresee your ongoing situation in the next number of years? May we also ask, if you can, what advice and practical steps new arts and cultural groups within the Northwest must do to be considered for core or bigger pots of funding, please? Thank you once again.
I think what we want is for ourselves to work together to ask for more funding for the arts. That's probably the first thing I want to say onto it. I want to also say in terms of that from cultural groups, I think we need to be doing is to actually look at other accesses funds and building other partners. There is other avenues of funding, which we are pointing people towards the Shared Island Unit. I know there has been some money done through the Shared Island, whether there's programs in terms of partnering with other organisations regarding mental health and actually making some proposals through the Public Health Agency to try and make that argument. But again, it's a part of the resilience programme that we're working with yourselves on is actually to try and look at how we can actually develop the arts on that basis, and that could tie into it. I mean, Roisin, you want to add anything?
Thanks, Alderman Middleton. Alderman Guy.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to Roisin, Liam and Ian for coming on to present today. Look, we know that funding is always cut first from the arts. It's been going on for years, and it's a difficult budget to manoeuvre and split amongst everyone. I'm not going to go down the same route as everybody else. I think it's all been well covered and documented here. Just touching on what Alderman Middleton had said, that in a statement that you did claim that, not yourselves maybe, but something the Arts Centre claimed that for the new strategy, it was based on 162 responses and 9 written submissions. Given that the fact that the Arts Council claimed to help thousands each year, is it not a narrow field to base a 10-year plan on? The majority of funding is quite repetitive in who gets it. It is the criteria doesn't help those new groups wishing to get on the ladder of the competitive core funding. And basically, you know, to overcome this, have you taken on board that the criteria needs to change? And as I say, with it being mostly repetitive, and ironically, the only one new group this year was from Belfast that actually got on, but new groups don't often get on. And how do you want to address that there?
In relation to the strategy, thank you for your question. That was the public consultation in terms of the equality impact assessment. But actually, the strategy engagement process started about 18 months ago, and we used a network of organisations to help us. So whilst we might have had a submission from an organisation, in fact, they were an umbrella body who had actually gone out and engaged with a broad range of their own stakeholders. So in a sense, that's probably a very conservative calculation. One thing that we noted, one thing we were very clear about this time is that we really wanted to get public engagement from people who had never participated in the arts, and we managed that. And that was actually really interesting. And we also targeted children and young people who were utterly amazing in terms of what it was they told us they wanted and they needed. So I don't think those numbers actually reflect either the depth and the extent of the engagement, because many of those came from umbrella organisations. We also got we also got responses from other public authorities and local authorities as well. And again, those would be composite responses. In relation to your question about people seeming to get year on year and that no new blood is coming in, I think that's a reasonable comment. In as much as two things I would say. One is, you know, we either have an orchestra, we have a theatre, or we have, you know, we have a number of things that people broadly regard as being essential to being able to access and participate and enjoy the arts, either as participants or as audience members. There are core things that you need. So yes, those will get funding year on year, absolutely. Our difficulty is, given the highly constrained resource environment, what we have been doing is using our lottery resources to try and shore up the core. And as a consequence, that has a knock-on effect. But we would use lottery project funding to bring on new organisations, new talent. And we hope very much that they will, you know, progress. And so some of the organisations that you see maybe occasionally coming on and occasionally going off our annual funding programme have grown through the lottery project funding and have come on to identified as a core client of the Arts Council in a very highly competitive resource environment. There just isn't enough money. And if we could relieve the pressure on our lottery funds not to shore up the core for arts organisations, I think we'd be in a lot happier place and be able to grow and create and innovate on a much wider basis. So thank you.
Thanks.
If I, Chair, could just... Oh, you'll have to switch yourself over. microphone. If I could just add a little to that and also pick up one of Councillor Hutton's comments and questions around capital funding. Capital funding, as Roisin said, is extremely constrained across the sector, across the executive, that at the moment there is not enough capital funding across all executive departments to cover off contractual commitments. So therefore, that is where we're starting from in terms of grants for whatever it may be in any field of any executive department. The likelihood of any monies being available this year is remote, I have to say. I don't want to be coming simply to be the harbinger of doom, but I do believe in being honest with people. I think that does lead to a question, and I ask this, I make this comment with some trepidation, but make it still, about the balance we strike between arts companies, shall I call them, and arts venues, and whether we have struck that balance right. We are proud of much of the arts infrastructure we have built in these places over the last 20 years. But even within this city, there is one very underused arts venue. And have we got the balance between the activity in the venues, what I might call the artistic companies, and maintaining buildings right? Buildings are a means to an end. And I've had a number of conversations around this city today with different people, all in different ways, raising that as one of the questions. And I think it is a tough thing to debate, but it is one I think we have to recognise, even if money was less scarce, but particularly with scarce money, how we're finding the balance between creative production, shall I call it, and the sheds in which we do it, deliberately sort of using a provocative word there.
Thank you. Alderman Guy, you happy enough? Yeah. Alderman Hussey.
Thanks for the opportunity and thanks for the presentation. Completely appreciate the situation that the arts will find itself in. As Darren has already said, they're going to finance at a time when the general public are saying, well, health, education, etc., is a very difficult task. And of course, we're not just talking about artists, we're talking about support and ancillary. Back up there, my own son, I thought he would go into a sensible maths degree, but he went into media production. John Moores, just qualified. He's working for Domino Pictures. And you did say about where people wish to work. Well, he lives in the West. He wants to work in the West. But the art facilities are not in the West for him to do that. So there is a question of regional imbalance. Now, I hate to put it down to population, because if we worked on population basis, I'm estimating that the 2.5 million that Derry City and Strabane have received would drop to about 1.6. Mind you, on the same basis, Belfast would drop by about 12 million. And as has been pointed out by Councillor Hutton, we're talking here about a major city region that encompasses cross-border on the island of Ireland. We are talking about the second city in Northern Ireland, the fourth city on the island. What recognition within your strategy is there of that fact? Not just Derry City and Strabane District Council, but the fact that Londonderry is the second city of Northern Ireland and deserving of recognition of that within the field of the arts. Because, I don't see it within the strategy. And I'm not just talking about the overall regional strategy. I'm talking about the strategic placement of arts facilities and opportunities. And we in this area are being denied those opportunities.
I think it's again the issue of regional development. As I said, the amount of money. Yeah, we fund a number of major arts organisations in Derry. Indeed, if you take Belfast and Derry gets the second number of it. So on a basis of the second city, it's in second place in terms of all the other cities in Northern Ireland. So I feel that has been dealt with. But I get back to the point this isn't a place-based strategy. It's an art form-based strategy. And yes, what we want to do is give people access to the arts and accessibility to the arts, accessibility to actually see the arts or get involved in the arts. So both them aspects of it is what we want to fund. Now, you don't do that purely on a regional basis. You do that in terms of supporting organisations that kind of outreach. And again, you know, I round off a number of organisations there. It's the University of Atypical, which we funds based in Belfast, works with people with disability. They work in the city area. You know, you have Craft NI, which supports craft organisations, again, based in the city, but operating here. So what we want to do is actually to be able to bring that out and make that happen here, you know. But I feel that in terms of how we fund and how our level of funding is actually recognising Derry as the second city.
I would argue that the success of those organisations is in spite of the Arts Council, and I just think on the potential that exists that doesn't get the chance to flourish.
You know, again, as a city, I spend time in the city, and you know, you talk to Kevin and the guys. I was in with the Millennium Forum looking at the work they want to do in their new seating and the new carpet and stuff like that. Indeed, we provided them health and safety money for doing the new carpet in terms of keeping it as a premier venue. You know, in terms of like the waterfront, the Millennium Forum is Derry's answer to that there. So we want to do it, but the problem is, folks, if we don't have the money, we can't do it. And like the Playhouse needs developed, it could do much work. Kevin has great dreams in terms of what he wants to do with it. We you know, I've been working with Kevin in terms of taking some, you know, the White Handkerchief production, how it can be reduced, how we can get it to Tour Ireland, talking to the, you know, to the Abbey and talking to other places how you can do that. So we want to work, but the problem is what we are relying on money coming in year. So we're sitting and holding these projects. So when the Department for Communities comes forward to us and says to us, listen, we've got an underspend of such and such, can you do it? We're first to the table. So I said we were 9.5 million. We've actually spent 11.8 million last year. Our initial allocation was, but the problem is no way to plan. To sort of say, we're waiting to December or January and we're saying to places like the Millennium, we need you to spend this money within 3 months. It's crazy way to work. We need multi-annual funding, and we need an increase in our budget, which is commensurate with the level of arts organisations and how we in the strategy want to develop arts organisations.
Thanks, Alderman Hussey. Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you. Thank you to all for your presentation. I just have a couple. I'm Strabane representative, right? And I appreciate your acknowledgement around the disparity between the rural and the urban. And I come from Strabane. We have the Alley Theatre, and if we hadn't got it, I think that there would be quite a few people who wouldn't get access to the arts. So, and again, like, you know, on your presentation, there's not in this anything around, you know, like proactively targeting deprivation. You know, you can have, see when you go like local authority areas, there can be a lot of them local authority areas that are low because they don't need it, you know, because they're affluent or because they've got good infrastructure into Belfast. Lisburn. Right, just a couple of miles on the road into Belfast, and wants to go into wherever the Opera House or whatever's going, it can nip on the road. When you're looking at, you know, the rural areas, it is much more difficult to actually get access. So what I'm asking is, as based on deprivation, based on access to the arts, then there needs to be a strategy of proactively targeting where applications are not come from and just not be application driven. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's a really important point that you raise. We didn't put it in this paper because there was so much that we, you know, of necessity had to leave out. But one of the analyses that we have done just very recently is in terms of the equality impact assessment of our funding programs is to say that 60% of Arts Council funding goes to the top 20% super output areas. So that is really a very significant figure. We're very conscious of access to the arts by people who, by dint of their circumstances, maybe just can't afford it. And that would include, as you've rightly said, the whole issue about rural communities. And we were very pleased that we, at one point, were able to support the Eye Centre in terms of capital provision. It's a facility I'm very aware of, and it's an excellent facility. And, you know, we would, your points are correct, but I wanted to give you that figure about 60% of our funding, which is unusual for comparable organisations in these islands, is what I'm going to say. So we fund a lot of community-based arts activity of an excellent and quality nature.
And I suppose, again, one of the initiatives in terms of the rural engagement programme, we call the REAP programme, was specifically designed over the last 3 years to target money to lower centres with lower levels of population, conscious that we need to do some sort of intervention in there in terms of accessibility for the arts.
As long as I see a big slab of money now coming for the LA Theatre, I'll be happy.
Thanks, Councillor Gallagher. Councillor Hargan.
Thanks for letting me in, Chair, and thank you to our visitors today for coming down and engaging with us. And I think there's two conversations that are happening concurrently here, and they're both very, very important. And I want to say something about each of them. Look, I think that the 35% cut to the Arts Council over the last decade is deplorable. I mean, that is reckless government cuts and of course, that's going to have a devastating impact right across the board. And I think that that has an impact on organisations functioning, but also on the ability of artists to sustain themselves, and people are struggling. And that's what we've heard from workers in our sector here, because we've had a lot of engagement with our arts sector. So we have a restored government, and I think that this government is going back with a lot of expectations that is going to reverse these cuts. And we have government parties in here telling you today that they're going to do everything that they can to reverse these cuts. So one question is, what do you think is going to happen? Because if this is another standstill budget, which will be another cut in effect, because every budget that remains the same is a budget that is a cut because of inflation. So what are your expectations? Because that's going to be useful in terms of informing the overall discussion, because a larger pot will allow you to do more things. And that's what we want to see. But there is a government there now, so what are you being told and what do you expect? So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is really just about the issue of regional disparity. And we've had a long-running discussion now, I think, over the last couple of years, that's been informed by, we have a very active arts and culture sector here, which is very good. They're very eager to expand and grow. And they are very activist when it comes to lobbying for more investment, and I think we should absolutely commend them for that. And that has meant that we have, and my colleagues that have worked with them on the council have challenged both the department and the Arts Council around the issue of regional disparity. And look, for the record, it was agreed at different meetings that there was a legacy of regional disparity. And that was from both the department and from the Arts Council. And there is certainly a perception that there is regional disparity, not just over 1 or 2 years, but over decades, right? So that's one thing that we are contending with. And I appreciate what Councillor Farrell said earlier about people looking at different figures and different statistics and really not being convinced. So I felt that there was a defensiveness around the challenge that was put up about we need more funding. And I think that, again, look, I don't think that we are funded disproportionately in reality, in the sense that Derry is the second city, as has been said before, or is the city region. We are getting what you could say would be a decent share, but really it's nothing comparable to what Belfast actually gets. And I don't want to turn this into just a simple Derry versus Belfast thing, because it's a much broader issue. But I think the funding we get is we deserve more, based on the fact that we are the second city, that we are a city region, and based on what we have to offer in terms of our arts and culture sector here in the district. And I think that there's space for a lot more there. So I think that people's intentions around challenging this is very good, because we want to see this expand. So yes, we get more funding compared to the very low levels in many other district areas, which is absolutely shocking. And I think we want to be advocates for equitable funding across the board, because we want arts and culture to flourish everywhere. But I do think that there is a real perception, right? And I don't think it has been undone by this document or the last couple of meetings. And I think that it's an oddity when Derry in our district is overfunded by anyone, because in some ways, look, Invest NI for a long time told us, no, you don't. We're actually funding you on a comparative level, which just wasn't true. We sometimes hear the same kind of things from Ulster University. It's never been true. And you can go through the organisations, Stormont, departments telling us, what you see as in reality. So I think that there is a work to do here in terms of addressing this issue of regional inequalities and regional disparities. But I do want to say that, like, I think it's a good thing that we have such an activist arts and culture sector who want to produce, who want to be in communities, who want to produce, who want to thrive in arts and culture sector that actually allows people to sustain themselves and allows people to actually stay in our district. And I know that all those people want that to exist right across the board as well. They want it in all the areas. So if you could just comment on both of those things, that would be great.
Thank you, Councillor Harkin. I'm going to take the first point and give some context to this. You're aware the executive set a budget last week before, for each department, and now each minister in each department is working out how he or she will allocate those funds. You've seen a number of ministers say how challenging that process is. For the Department for Communities, all departments were asked to work with what's called inescapable spend. So that's contractually or statutorily or in other ways legally required spend. And all departments said to Department of Finance how much money they needed. And this isn't an anti-Department of Finance piece, because they are getting the calculator and adding up all those amounts and seeing how much money is available. Department for Communities bid for £130 million, 130, of inescapable spend for this year. We were allocated 13 million. So therefore, Minister Lyons has to take £117 million out of inescapable spend already in the middle of month 2 of the financial year in question. So therefore, and Minister Swan and Minister Long and Minister Hargie, as it is now, making similarly challenging decisions in their departments. So that is the context. It'll be for Minister Lyons to make those decisions. He recognises there's an urgency to them, but he also recognises he wants to get this as right as he can. And he is working at pace to try and address that. Any area that gets more money, this is flat cash, this isn't even real terms money. Any part of the department that gets more money means somebody else is cut even more in the department. So that is the grim reality of where we are budget-wise.
I suppose just to pick up on in terms of from the Arts Council's perspective, one of the first things we did was we wrote to Minister Lyons and got a meeting with him to sort of set out the stall. And again, Ian has to take a department view on it. I suppose I can take an Arts Council view on it. But as an arm's length body, if we've seen our budget is flatlined at £10 million for the last 10 years, and even last year dropping by a 5% cut to £9.5 million, we're in a worse position than any arm's length body. So a standstill budget for us is a massive cut, and will will mean that we may have some hard choices to make in terms of how we're going to fund. You know, do we cut? Do we slammy slice? Do we prioritise? Do we target some areas, leave other areas out? But it is major issues for us. Now, the Minister, I must say, give myself and Roisin and Vice Chair William Needham a good hearing, and he said he does get the situation, the particular nature of the Arts Council, because the Arts Council, unlike a number of arms length bodies, 80% of our budget goes out. It's not retained within ourselves. So we hold a part of our budget just for the staff costs, which is only 40 staff. It's reduced from 60 staff in the last 5 years, but it's a bare minimum staff. So in terms of the budget, any cut is a real cut to actually what we can give to other organisations. To pick up your point about the regional disparity, I get back, I think to the point is, I think we do recognise Derry, and we do recognise the importance and the fantastic arts organisation we've got there. You know, as I said, on the board of Unboxed, you know, one of the reasons we got the Nerve Centre to get that major project, which is £6 million of investment into an arts organisation here, which was showcased across the world. That again is our commitment in terms of making sure that, you know, we recognise the fantastic creatives that are within the Greater Derry area, and we want to support them. If we ain't got the dough, we can't get more money into the area, and that's the real thing. So in real terms, if it's flatlined or if we haven't got the money, the funding for some of the organisations will have to be cut, and we're going to have to sit down as a board and make decisions around that. And it's a terrible situation to be in.
Thanks for the response. Thanks, Councillor Hargan.
Well, thank you for them responses.
Councillor Gallagher, once back in, you'll be the last
Thank you.
speaker
Very brief
because we
point.
could be here all night.
I know that the irony, like if we ain't got the dough, there is no show. But it was just one element I like to work. I would just like to, there's thing on the report I'd like to welcome, but your report highlights like we'd be 4 times better off in the United Ireland, you know. So that's another one to stroke up, you know. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, and thanks for all the members for their questions. You can see it's something that everybody's quite passionate about, and we value, you know, the contribution that arts makes to society. So thanks, Ian and Roisin and Liam, for coming in and putting your case forward. We'll take a 5-minute comfort break now and resume again. Thank you.